So, have you ever noticed that desire doesn't show up in the same way every single day? In fact, on some days your desire level may be up here, and then on other days it may be down here. And that's because desire actually works on switches, invisible switches. In fact, there are two switches, psychological and physical, that exist. And I'm going to show you how to turn these desire switches on and off. Hi, I'm Scott Shortley, and I'm the founder of Coelle, a guided audio intimacy app for couples. And today, what I want to talk about is desire, specifically the invisible switches of desire, which, as I mentioned earlier, tend to be physical as well as psychological. And so, if you can learn how to turn these switches on and off, you'll have better control over your desire levels. And so, I've got a few of them here that I want to walk you through, and we're just going to go through each one by one. All right, so the first one here is that safety leads to desire. So if you think about intimacy, it's not really about physical arousal. In fact, the thing that is really at the core is this idea, it's this concept of safety. Because when you're safe, when your partner's safe, that's when things begin to open up. And so if you're wanting to have sort of this increase or enhancement in desire, the very first thing that you need to do at a very ground level is establish safety. Now, you can do this in a number of ways. Obviously, the more comfortable you are with your partner, if you've been together for a long time, safety's kind of automatically emerge, but not necessarily always in those environments. So particularly if you're introducing new things into the bedroom, you may have to revisit topics like consent and what's okay and not okay, and they like being touched this way or not this way. And so the more you can sort of establish those guide rails for your relationship, if you can build those sort of safety practices, then desire will start to emerge. All right, let's talk about number two here, or at least as far as these invisible switches. So number two here is that attention leads to arousal. So if you think about your most intimate moments, it's when I'm sure both of you were dialed in together, right? When you were in that present moment. If your head was thinking about tomorrow's presentation, or maybe your partner, they're thinking about their to-do list, or maybe they got to pack lunch for the kids right after this, whatever it may be, that's where attention sort of diminishes. It's sort of non-existent in those scenarios. And so the more that you can be focused on each other and get rid of the distractions, attention again leads to arousal. And so one of the beautiful things I love about guided audio intimacy is that it helps enable that you just listen to the narrator. It's sort of like having a GPS as compared to operating from a map. The GPS will tell you where you need to go, how to do it, how to get there, and you can just dial into that present moment. So it's a really great way to get into this attention mindset where you can accomplish this end result of arousal. All right, let's talk about the third switch. All right, so this third one is kind of a favorite of mine. You're gonna hear me talk about it quite a bit. But this third switch is that novelty leads to dopamine. And so if you think about dopamine, the dopamine hits that we get when we scroll, or those little instant sort of pieces of pleasure, that dopamine sort of kick, that's going to come from novelty. So the more you can actually introduce into the bedroom, the more new things, new positions, new playlists, a new environment, even a guided audio intimacy session, anything that's new, anything that sort of feels fresh, that feels different, that is sort of, breaks the routine and the patterns, that's going to give everyone in that situation sort of a nice little kick in dopamine. And so if you can do this, obviously it's going to create for a much more lively experience. So that's switch number three, is understand that novelty leads to dopamine. And that's a good thing in this case. All right, let's talk about number four. So number four here is another one of my personal favorites, and it's that slowness leads to sensitivity. And so in an intimate environment, obviously there are going to be your moments, your spontaneous moments specifically, where you might want to have a quickie. But generally speaking, when maybe sex is scheduled, maybe when it's something you've been looking forward to for the last couple days or for the last week, this idea of slowness is really important. And I think it's one of these areas that often gets overlooked. In fact, one of the categories in Coelle is called slow and sensual. And it's there for a reason, because I want to encourage people to move slowly. So let's say you're thinking about foreplay and you're thinking, well, 5 minutes is enough. Well, probably doesn't hurt to go to 10 or 8 minutes or 15 minutes. Like, you really can't do harm in going a little bit longer. And so slowness is great. It just, again, allows a couple, allows partners to, again, dial into each other. It creates that extra level of sensitivity. It creates that extra level of sensuality. So move slowly. And again, if you want to practice this, maybe you find yourself going a little bit too fast, pull up a guided audio intimacy session, find something that is slow and sensual, and hit play and let it guide you through that experience. All right, let's talk about the next one. So number 5 here is that emotional access leads to physical arousal. So what I mean by this is basically finding ways to reconnect with your partner. So this is being curious about their life. It's getting back into that sort of exploratory mindset where you find your partner fascinating. Trying to sort of rekindle those moments where it's simply just being interested, because we tend to kind of lose that, specifically within long-term relationships. And so if your partner can feel seen, if they can feel heard, if they can feel connected, that's what you're going for. And this is kind of what you can think of as sort of like a slow foreplay, that you can be working on this hours and days before sort of that intimate moment. And so if you can, again, establish that level of connectedness, it's going to lead to physical arousal. So it's going to make that intimate moment that much more powerful. All right, let's talk about the next one. And so the last switch here is that permission leads to desire. And so it kind of nicely brings this all back together, since we're kind of landing back on this desire theme. And so what we mean by permission leads to desire is that we all have wants, we all have needs, we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard, right? And so it's about this permission to feel safe. It's this permission to feel desired. It's this permission to feel good, this permission to seek out pleasure and get pleasure. If you can get those needs met, if you can feel like, hey, I'm a normal person with my own wants and needs, that's where desire begins to emerge. And so if we can all be mindful of these switches, we're going to be all better off in the bedroom. All right, so as we begin to wrap up here, the thing I want to remind you of is that, yes, desire, it can fluctuate day to day. Again, as I mentioned, some days it's going to be up here, some days it's going to be here, some days it's going to be here. But if you want it to be more like this on a consistent level, where you're always kind of in that mode, you've got to be mindful of these invisible switches. And again, these switches are both psychological and physical. And so if you can kind of put these in your back pocket and sort of remember these lessons today, it'll allow you to sort of have more control over what your desire level is and how it's operating day to day. All right, if you enjoyed this content, as always, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe. My goal here is to continue talking about and sharing about guided audio intimacy, so I appreciate you joining me in this journey. And until next time, remember this: intimacy isn't automatic, it's guided.